con noi il professor Joseph Stiglitz. Diamogli il benvenuto, professor Stiglitz. A very good evening, Professor. Thanks for joining us. We are delighted and honored to have you today. Where are you? Are you in Europe? I think you're in Denmark, aren't you?
I'm in Paris.
I see.
And I wish I were in Sardinia.
Yeah, absolutely. And we wish you were here, Professor. So let me start with this, because today is day 115 since Trump's return at the White House. So 115 down, but 1,347 to go. So as you know, many things already happened. And so it all started with this thing of reciprocal tariffs on April the 2nd. And then Trump, under market pressure, under market fire, he had to pull back a bit, and then it turned into a commercial war with China. But over the weekend in Geneva, they started talk with China. So what's your sense of where are we in this kind of commercial global war, and what's the main target of the administration?
Well, I think one has to understand that Trump doesn't understand economics. He is filled with misconceptions, grievance, and the consequence is that his conception of what is good economic policy and what is achievable is just wrong. So let me give you an example. He thinks that whenever a country has a trade deficit, there's been unfair treatment by others. That's not true. The reason that the U.S. has a big trade deficit is the fact that we have macroeconomic imbalances, that we save too little, and when national saving is less than domestic investment, there has to be a trade deficit, a capital inflow. Now, you mentioned the agreements that were done over the weekend. The agreement with the UK shows that the world is in a new place. It undermined the basic philosophy of agreements for the last 80 years, which is called the most favored nation principle, that you treat everybody the same. What it did is give UK more access, favorable access to American cars, to American market for UK cars than our neighbor Canada has. So it really undermines the principles that have been the foundation of international trade for a very long time. The agreement with China was a face-saving agreement. All the cards were in China's hands, and China forced the U.S. to back down. So we're back where we were months ago. There is an announcement of 90 days pause, but who knows what will happen after 90 days. Tariffs may go up again, the war may start, maybe not, but what Trump has introduced is enormous uncertainty, and it's the end of the old era. That is the one certainty that we have. The kind of global framework we have working towards a borderless world, that world is over.
Yeah, well, Professor, it is clear, your conception of Trump's understanding of the economy, and 2/3 of the American, they think based on this week's survey that his policy is chaotic. But at the same time, some are saying, if we cut out the noise, there's a design in his domestic and international agenda. For example, you escalate, as he did on April the 2nd, to de-escalate. And actually, if you look at the market, the markets are cheering a 30% level of tariff that just 2 months ago could have been an horrible level or a nightmare. And today, Wall Street has rallied back quite quickly, but the level of tariff is higher than before. What do you make of that? Don't you think that there's also some design behind this chaos?
I think that there is a perspective, but it's basically wrong. What he wants to do is, they call the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again. And the word again is crucial. He's looking back to the middle of the last century when America was in industrial power and where we were the dominant political power. Now, the fact of the matter is that industry is only less than 10% of GDP, 10% of employment. And even if he were very successful, manufacturing will only go up to maybe 12%. It'll be a minor adjustment. Moreover, what he wants to do is bring back jobs, but he doesn't understand 21st century manufacturing, particularly when we're talking about cars, are done by robots. So even if manufacturing comes back, it'll be robots that'll be making it. I was, in March, I was in China. I went to a car factory where they were making EV. 2,000 workers were producing 1,000 cars a day. All the work was being done by robots. The humans were just around watching to make sure the robots were well behaved and there was no problem. Most of them were essentially unemployed. And the owner of the firm said, as soon as it was a new factory, as soon as they're sure that everything is working well and it has been working well, they won't need most of those workers. Most of the people in the firm are engaged in research. They're engineers. That's not going to solve the problem of deindustrialization in the Midwest and the South and the other parts of the United States. So that is another example of a fundamental misconception that Trump has.
Well, you're clearly skeptical that it's going to strike the deal that he's seeking, but at the same time, it all accelerated a global reset of the economy. We are in transition. Clearly, the economy was already changing, post-COVID and then post the Russian invasion in Ukraine. So we are in a transition. Do you have an idea of what's the destination of this transition? How the new economic order will look like in the near to medium term?
Well, I think he has both, again, a misunderstanding of the economic and the political destination. The economic destination that we should be heading for is a digital green economy. What is the nature of a digital green economy? Well, first, it's green. And he denies the very existence of climate change. So he's not moving in that direction. The nature of a digital economy is it's a knowledge economy. What is he doing to the basis of our knowledge economy? He's attacking our universities. He's cutting off funding for all research. So he's weakening the basis of our entry, our advance in this new economy. On the political side, he's also going back to an earlier era, probably back to the 19th century, not the 20th century, because he sees the world as big powers. He wants the U.S. to dominate in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, if China dominates in its area, and maybe Russia in the middle. He doesn't have much room for Europe. In the Western Hemisphere, he wants to take over Greenland, Panama, Canada. He wants to make that the 51st state. And from what one can tell, he's actually quite serious about these proposals. Well, we live in a different world. U.S. is only about 20% of global GDP. It doesn't have the economic and political power that it had at the end of World War II. I can understand his wanting to go back to that earlier world, but you just can't do it. So what he should be doing, where America should be going, is trying to show leadership in a new world, a multipolar world, not a world dominated by one country or another, or where one country dominates one part and another country dominates the other. It's not the world that we are going to go to, hopefully, and I don't think he can achieve those ambitions, as his failure in trying to impose enormous tariffs on China shows. China didn't back down, he had to back down.
Well, I see, but as in any transition, there will be big winners and big losers. Looking globally, where do you think that the benefit, but also the bad effect, the worst effect of this will happen to be?
Well, I think the worst effects are going to be, unfortunately, back in the United States. I think the United States is going to be the big loser from this strategy. We benefited enormously from multilateralism, from the global economy. We helped write the rules of the global economy, and we did it partly for the benefit of our corporations, our big finance companies. So we were some of the big winners in the kind of world that we had helped create. But I think the whole world actually benefited in many ways from this. I think the rest of the world is going to lose somewhat from the breakdown of global cooperation. But what my hope is, and it's not certain at this point, my hope the rest of the world goes forward in what I sometimes call the G-1 world. The rest of the world needs to cooperate together. There are really important problems. Climate change, we're going to face another pandemic, and we have to work together in addressing that. Sharing of knowledge, including knowledge about AI and how do we respond to that. These are all things where there is enormous scope for global cooperation. And if Europe, China, Latin America, Africa cooperate together, I think in the end, they will wind up the winners.
Well, Professor, you're traveling Europe, and yesterday, Mario Draghi, in what has already been called the Coimbra call, well, he said this is a great heads up for Europe. He said the recent events are a break point for Europe, have undermined the multilateral order in a way that it's hardly reversible. And what he's suggesting Europe to do is to invest massively and responsibly in common goods like, defense, technology, energy, but with the issuance of common debt. Do you think this is the response? And can Europe move further, because we've been kind of stalled for more than 20 years in the same governance that today apparently cannot work anymore?
I think Draghi is absolutely right, and I congratulate him on very much saying the same thing that I've been saying. You're right that Europe has had a hard time coming together, although it did come together in responding to the pandemic, and it did come together in responding to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And now this new order is a moment where I think Europe is finally beginning to realize there is a new order, and it can't just go on in the way that it had been going on before. And this is a moment of opportunity. Let me just give you one example. It'll be a challenging example, but it's an important one. Under pressure from the US, Europe started to move away from interactions with China. US put a lot of pressure on Europe not to buy certain kinds of Chinese technology. There was always skepticism about whether that was necessary, whether that was good for Europe. But now, the US has made it very clear that Europe can't depend on the US for its defense. Europe has to create its own defense. Europe can't depend on US for technology. Europe has to create its own technology. And cooperation, the rules of engagement with other countries need to be set by Europe. You will be under enormous pressure to not to take strong actions on climate change. You'll be under enormous pressure not to impose a digital tax. You'll be under enormous pressure not to make sure that AI and social media are well regulated, that there are standards of safety that are important, and privacy that are important for Europeans. You'll have to resist that and chart your own way. No. So I think Trump has been a wake-up call. You know, when Trump first got elected, some of us, including me, said, this is a moment where Europe really needs to begin to get together, come together, and U.S. was less reliable. But if Trump could be elected once, there was, we warned, a possibility he could be elected a second time.
Yeah.
Now that he's been elected a second time, you've really had a warning. If he can be elected a second time, somebody as bad or worse could be elected. So it hurts me to have to say this, but these are the realities that Europe has to come to terms with.
Well, he doesn't exclude to be elected also third term, even though, I mean, there's a constitution, but he said, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if I have to obey the constitution. Well, in any case, talking about Europe, Professor Stiglitz, Italy is performing decently well compared with the rest of European countries. Well, at least in terms of the trust of financial markets, our spread on German Bund is below 100 points, which historically is a low level. S&P has upgraded the country just a few weeks ago. Do you have an idea, or how do you see Italy in this European framework?
Well, I think, let me first put it, that I think if one does what we just talked about and what Draghi talks about, expands, increases fiscal spending on defense and technology. It's going to be good for Europe in the short run, and it's going to be good for Europe in the long run. There's going to be a slowdown in the US. Good chance that we'll go into a recession. But as I said earlier, all the tariff war, all the Doge attack on our institutions, the mass firings, the attack on our universities are going to be bad for the United States in the short run and in the long. So where Europe can go now is to have an expansionary fiscal policy and a long-term technology and growth policy that will be good both in the short run and the long run. The fact that Germany has eliminated its debt brake is really important in this. Now, this brings me to Italy. Italy is an important part of Europe. And if Europe is growing in the way that I just described, if it is using its fiscal policy to avoid the downturn or the weakness in the United States, then Italy will be an enormous beneficiary. And particularly, there are parts of Italy where there's enormous technological strength. You have a very strong human capital. So again, what I want to emphasize, one shouldn't just focus on the short run, but also the long run. And both of these today are working in the same direction. This is a moment, a wake-up moment that hopefully will set Italy and Europe on a path of a stronger economy today and a stronger economy in the future. And maybe that's what the markets are beginning to recognize.
Well, talking about the outlook for the economy, your outlook, Professor, here we've got the elite of the industry, Italian retail industry and distribution, and everyone is interested in understanding, are we slowing down in terms of growth? Are we heading in the US towards a recession or a stagflation, which sounds even worse than a recession for many aspects? So what's your take on where are we heading in terms of the economy?
Well, in general, as I say, in the United States, I think we're heading for stagflation. And I'll give a couple of reservations of how things might turn out differently. If Trump actually goes through with his tariffs, it will raise prices. And those increases in prices would normally induce the Federal Reserve, our central bank, to raise interest rates, and that will slow down the economy. There's another reason the economy is slowing down, is the strong immigration policy. We depend very heavily on immigrants. And if we don't have those immigrants, it will hurt our labor supply, and that itself will be inflationary. Thirdly, there's a power of fear among many of the immigrants in the United States. You go to parts of New York City, and they're dead. They're dead because people are afraid to go out of their house, because we have a lot of people of color. And even people of color who are US citizens are afraid that ICE, our immigration authorities, will come in and take them, arrest them. And so there's this power of fear, which is very bad for our economy. So these are some of the elements that are working on the supply side, and then on the demand side, there's not only that, but the fact that the uncertainty of tariffs going up and down and up and down has again created a discouraging both consumers and investors. Consumer confidence is extraordinarily low right now. And so that is also going towards a weaker economy. Now, I said there's a couple caveats. One of them is we've seen how Trump has backed down from the tariffs. They're still higher than they were when he entered office, but they are markedly lower than when he said what he said they would be.
Well, Professor, we have to wrap it up a bit, but in recent and past crises, in the end, central banks came to the rescue. Now, apparently it's more difficult this time for many reasons. We saw that from April to May, financial markets were scared to death by what was happening in the treasury market, and the dollar slide was a sign of fear in the trust of the US as a safe haven. And more, Trump want to fire Jay Powell, the head of the Fed. He says he's a fool. He says he doesn't understand nothing in terms of interest rates. He's better than him. So in a nutshell, what do you make of this? Is the US still a safe haven and the dollar as well in the future will remain like that? Or the scarf, I mean, the wand that has been made will remain?
I think financial markets are going to remain volatile. And there's one aspect of this that hasn't gotten the attention that maybe it should. There is something that is called the Mar-a-Lago Accord that has been pushed by the chairman of his Council of Economic Advisors. And in that Mar-a-Lago Accord is a proposal, this is from the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, to force countries to exchange their T-bills, their dollar, their treasuries for 100-year bonds, century bonds that pay no interest. As some of the people that I talked to when I was in China, leaders of China said, that's a default. So if the Trump administration is proposing a default, those who hold those treasuries ought to be worried. Now, the market hasn't paid much attention to this. I don't know whether Trump will pay much, whether he will pursue this or not. You know, one of the things about Trump is that he's very unpredictable, but he does push policies that make no sense. And so I think the world is in for a roller coaster. And you better tighten your seatbelts because things are going to go up and down.
Absolutely. That's what we've been doing. Last question, Professor. Do you feel like that in the future here, in our supermarket, in our grocery, and in shop, we're going to pay with digital assets, digital coins, for example? Because Trump is pushing so hard to make the US as the capital, the global capital of digital assets and the Bitcoin, for example. What do you make of this? Because the Italian government is really scared that, you know, from the US, this could also move to Europe and create instability at the financial level.
I think the Italian government is right to be worried about it. We used to have good currencies, the yen, the euro, the dollar. You know, each of them had their little problems, and at one moment one was stronger, the other at another moment. But these are good currencies. What we know about Bitcoins and the other cryptocurrencies is the reason that they are desired is because of the crypto, the lack of transparency. You know, for somebody like me who's worked for decades to try to make financial markets more transparent, this is going in the wrong way. Why do people want lack of transparency? To engage in corruption and other kinds of tax avoidance, evasion, and other kinds of nefarious activities. And we see in the United States that that is what they are being used for, including by the Trump administration. We've seen with FTX and other of the digital players, enormous instability, lack of regulation, real problems and shady characters involved. So I would strongly advise Italy and Europe to have strong regulations and not to the United States to make your economy like the American economy. You should be looking at what's happening in the U.S. about these the uses to which these cryptocurrencies are being used, including by the U.S. government, by the Trump administration, and that should be a lesson.
Professor Stiglitz, thank you so much. The Road to Freedom is your book that you're presenting all over Europe. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye, Professor. Grazie. Grazie davvero al Professor Stiglitz.